Hey guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here. I want to talk to you about a movie that I watched last night. As I'm filming this video, I watched it last night. The first Friday the 13th movie, which came out in, if I'm not mistaken, 1979. Stars a whole bunch of people who I don't know. I didn't look them up, so I'm not going to tell you who all's in this movie. The only one I recognized was Kevin Bacon, and he isn't even the main guy. So it's really weird how sometimes that works out. Now, this wasn't Kevin Bacon's first movie or anything, so it's not like he got his start in this movie, but sometimes the one guy who's like not very important in the movie ends up being a huge star, much more so than the main character in the movie. But anyway, this movie is the first in like 13 or something movies. There's a ridiculous amount of Friday the 13th movies. I had no idea there was that many movies. This is the first one. It was on Netflix. It may still be on Netflix by the time this video goes up. I don't know. I saw it on there, and usually around Halloween, I look up a whole bunch of the classic horror movies to see if they're on Netflix, and they usually aren't on Halloween, or at least the first in a series isn't on Netflix. They may have like Friday the 13th Part 7, but they wouldn't have Part 1. And I noticed that they did have Part 1 on Netflix last night, so I went ahead and watched it just so I could finally watch it. And this movie sucks. There's no beating around the bush. I'm not even going to say, well, the movie tries its best, but no, this movie was really terrible. And I will explain why. First of all, for about 4/5 of the movie, there's absolutely no story. And you may be saying, what? Shocking. No story in a slasher movie? Yeah, I know, but I was expecting there to be a little bit of story, and there just wasn't. The main story, as it is that there's a group of young people, probably between 20 to 22 years old. They're working for an older guy who is trying to restore Camp Crystal Lake. And 20 years before the movie starts, there are 2 murders at Camp Crystal Lake. So for a long time now, this camp has been closed down, and he is trying to restore it so that they can have camp sessions there once again. And somebody is killing all of these counselors before they can even restore the campgrounds. As it turns out, the year before the 2 murders happened at the very beginning of the movie, in 1957, I believe, a little boy drowned, and his name was Jason Voorhees. And if you're familiar with Friday the 13th, he is the main villain of the series. Incidentally, he doesn't really appear in this movie at all. It's his mother, Mrs. Voorhees, who is the main bad guy of this movie. I knew that because I had seen the movie Scream a few times, and they mentioned that in Scream. Here's what I was expecting to happen, though. I thought, based on what I'd heard in Scream and what I'd heard outside of that movie and just what I'd heard about this movie, I thought that this was going to be a situation where everyone in the movie thinks that Jason is hunting them down. And then at the end of the movie, it's like, oh, it's not Jason, it's actually his mom, and it's a big twist reveal or something. That's not what it is. For 4/5 of the movie, you don't even know that there is a Jason Voorhees. All you know is that in 1957, a little boy drowned, and they don't even put emphasis on that. They just briefly mention it, and there's actually more emphasis on the 2 kids who get murdered the following year. And that has nothing to do with Jason, other than the fact that his mom basically goes insane, and she blames everyone even kind of associated with this summer camp for not watching over his kid to make sure that he didn't die. And so that's kind of the impetus for her actions in this movie. It doesn't really make any sense, though, because she specifically mentions that the 2 counselors who were supposed to be watching Jason when he died, they were making love, and so they weren't watching him. And you would think, okay, her beef is specifically with summer counselors who aren't doing their job, and they're off being irresponsible, and they're making love and just doing what teenagers do in a slasher movie. Except that she's killing people who don't fit that description. For example, she kills the guy who's kind of the boss, and he's trying to restore the camp, and he doesn't do anything like that. He's not off having sex when he's supposed to be doing his job. He's just doing his job, and she kills him. She kills this one girl who, as near as I can tell, is the most wholesome character in the entire movie. She didn't even get to the camp. She kills her before she gets there. She kills some other people who are, yeah, a little bit more in that description of kids who are making love when they're supposed to be doing their job. She kills 2 people who are definitely fit in that description. She kills one guy who isn't. I mean, he's an annoying jerk, but he didn't really do anything that would warrant being killed. It really doesn't make any sense with the motivation that she kind of gives near the end of the movie. Now, if you say, well, her motivation is just to shut down the campground and make sure that it doesn't ever have kids being campers there again, well then yeah, it makes sense that she's just killing anybody associated with this. But then there's better ways that she could have done that. So not only does this movie completely avoid any kind of dramatic tension by trying to allow the audience to try and figure out who the murderer is along with the movie, it just kind of cheats and says, oh, by the way, here's Mrs. Voorhees about 10 seconds before she reveals to the audience that she's the killer. That is sloppy writing. I don't care if you have 800 billion sequels like Friday the 13th does, that is sloppy writing. You do not introduce the murderer 30 seconds before you say, by the way, here's the murderer. That's not how it works. You're supposed to introduce this character in Act 1. That's what they say. Chekhov's gun. Before you fire Chekhov's gun in Act 3, you have to introduce the gun in Act 1. That's what they say. This movie completely breaks that rule, and as such, it's a sloppy, not really well-written movie. If I had just seen this movie, if I didn't know anything about slasher movies at all, if I didn't know anything about Friday the 13th, I would say there's no way in heck that this movie could have ever gotten a sequel, let alone 35 billion sequels like it has. It's really surprising to me that this movie has that much popularity. I'm assuming that all of the other movies are a ton better than this one. This one is pretty bad. Now, I've heard that some of the sequels are really bad. I may get around to watching those eventually. I don't know. I know several of them are on Netflix, so I'll probably be reviewing those, and you'll probably be seeing those up on this channel in the next few weeks. But this one, it has very little redeeming qualities about it. A lot of people, I want to say, the reason that they love this movie is because of nostalgia. They saw it when they were probably 13, and it really scared them then, and they really loved it then, and now, when they're adults, some 20, 30 years later, it's not nearly as good, but they still like it because it holds that sentimental value that they watched it when they were a kid. But if you watch this movie without any of the rose-colored glasses, you're probably going to see this movie isn't very good. Even in the family of slasher movies, it's not very good. I can think of at least 2 or 3 other slasher movies that are, on a technical level, just better than this movie. Just better written, better filmed, better sets, stuff like that. This movie just isn't very good on any level. And I'm being really harsh on it because it's so wildly popular. If this movie wasn't as popular, I wouldn't be as harsh on it, because that would be like beating up the kid who can't run away from you because he's really slow or something like that. I wouldn't do that. But this movie is really popular, and it befuddles me that it's that popular, but it is, and a lot of people really love it. So that's all I have to say about this movie. As I said, several of the sequels are on Netflix, so I'm probably going to be watching those just to see if the popularity for this franchise is warranted, or if all of the other movies are just as bad. So I'll be reviewing those in the coming weeks as I watch them, depending on if they have all of them on Netflix. If they don't have a sequel on Netflix, then I'm probably not going to watch it, unless I can find it on like Amazon Prime or something like that. So that's all I have to say about this movie. I hope that you guys liked this review. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will talk to you guys later with a different kind of video. Catch you later.